I always thought the legends of Christmas were just that, stories to add a bit of magic to the holiday season. Santa Claus, with his jolly laugh and endless gift-giving, was the embodiment of that magic. But growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania, I learned that not all legends are meant to bring joy. Some are born from darkness, lurking just beneath the surface of our cherished traditions. It was the winter of 1985, a particularly harsh one that blanketed our town in snow early and kept it there well into March. The air was crisp, the nights long, and the spirit of Christmas was as strong as ever. Families adorned their homes with lights and decorations. Children eagerly awaited Santa's arrival, and the scent of pine and cinnamon filled every household. But amidst the cheer, there was an undercurrent of something unsettling, a presence that people whispered about but rarely spoke of openly. Krampus. Krampus was a name I heard only in hushed tones, often from my grandfather. He spoke of a creature from old European folklore, a dark counterpart to Santa Claus. While Santa rewarded the good, Krampus punished the naughty, tall and menacing, with horns curling from his head and eyes that glowed with a malevolent light. Krampus was said to roam the streets on Christmas Eve, ensuring that those who misbehaved faced his wrath. As a child, I dismissed these tales as nothing more than scary stories meant to keep us in line. But that year, something changed. It started subtly, with strange noises outside my window on Christmas Eve. First, I thought it was the wind, howling through the bare branches of the evergreens that lined our street. But then I saw the shadows moving, tall, hunched figures with elongated limbs and clawed hands, slipping silently through the night. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, fueled by the eerie legends my grandfather shared. Yet, the unease grew. My parents were away for the holidays, visiting relatives in another state, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the incessant flicker of Christmas lights casting dancing shadows across my room. On Christmas Eve, the town was quieter than usual. The usual hustle and bustle had settled into a peaceful stillness, broken only by the occasional car passing by and the distant laughter of children playing in the snow. I decided to stay up, curious and restless, watching the world through my window. Midnight approached, and the clock's ticking seemed louder, each second stretching into eternity. That's when I saw them. Two figures dressed as Santa Claus. But something was horribly wrong. Their suits were tattered, the red fabric stained and dirty. Their faces were obscured by grotesque masks, twisted expressions frozen in a permanent snarl. They moved with an unnatural gait, their eyes glinting with a sinister light as they prowled the streets. One of them approached my house, its movements jerky and erratic. I held my breath, heart pounding in my chest. As it reached my window, the creature paused, tilting its head as if listening to something only it could hear. Then, with a swift motion, it turned and melted back into the shadows, leaving me shaken but unharmed. Couldn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house, every whisper of the wind, made me jump. My mind raced with thoughts of Krampus and the dark tales my grandfather had shared. I wondered if the legends were true, if these twisted Santas were manifestations of an ancient curse brought to life. The next morning, Christmas Day, the town seemed normal. Families gathered for festive meals. Children opened their presents with joy, and the spirit of the season was palpable. But beneath the surface, an unspoken tension lingered. People avoided the streets after dark, wary of the shadows that might conceal something sinister. A few days after Christmas, strange things began to happen. Pets went missing, their screams echoing through the night. Homes were broken into, not for the valuables, but for something far more disturbing. It was as if Krampus and his cohorts were searching for something specific, something beyond mere punishment. I couldn't ignore it any longer. Determined to uncover the truth, I revisited my grandfather's old journals. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with his meticulous handwriting. He had documented sightings of Krampus dating back decades, each account more terrifying than the last. According to him, Krampus was not just a myth but a real entity, a dark force that thrived on fear and chaos during the holiday season. One entry stood out: a ritual to protect oneself from Krampus. It involved lighting a special candle made from pine wax and placing it in every window to ward off the creature's influence. Skeptical but desperate, I decided to try it. That evening, I gathered the materials and lit the candles, placing them in every window of my house. The flickering flames cast a warm glow, and for a moment, I felt a sense of security. But peace was fleeting. On the second night, Krampus returned, more formidable than ever. This time, it wasn't just one or two twisted Santas but an entire pack. Their eyes burning with an unholy light, they circled my home, their claws scraping against the glass, their snarls piercing the silence. I watched in horror as they began to claw at the windows, attempting to break in. Panicked, I remembered my grandfather's journals. The candles, I realized, were a temporary measure. The true protection lay in confronting the darkness head-on. Summoning all my courage, I approached the front door, holding a pine branch, another of my grandfather's protective charms. As I stepped outside, the cold night air bit at my skin. The creatures lunged at me, their claws reaching for my throat. I brandished the pine branch, holding it high. To my surprise, the creatures recoiled, their grotesque forms writhing in pain. It was working. The power of the natural world seemed to repel the dark entities, forcing them back into the shadows. But there was no time to celebrate. The leader of the pack, a towering figure with massive horns and eyes that glowed like embers, stepped forward. It was Krampus himself. "You cannot banish us forever," he growled, his voice a deep, resonant rumble. "We will return each year, as long as there is darkness to feed upon." I stood my ground, the pine branch steady in my hand. "Not while I have light to fight it," I replied, my voice stronger than I felt. The candles burned brightly behind me, their light a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. Krampus snarled, a sound that shook the very ground beneath my feet. For a moment, it seemed as though the two forces were locked in a silent battle, the outcome uncertain. Then, with a final, anguished cry, Krampus and his minions dissipated into the night, retreating into the shadows from whence they came. Exhausted but victorious, I returned indoors, collapsing onto the floor. The candles continued to burn, their light unwavering. The town slowly returned to normal, the horrors of those nights fading into memory. But the experience left an indelible mark on me, a reminder that darkness can take many forms, even within the traditions we hold dear. Years later, I still think about that winter. The legends of Krampus were no longer just stories but a lived reality, a testament to the fragile balance between light and darkness. I continue to honor my grandfather's teachings, keeping candles lit each Christmas Eve, a small but steadfast defense against the shadows. This Christmas, as I watch children eagerly await Santa's arrival, I remember the thin line between joy and fear. Krampus may be a creature of legend, but the fear he embodies is very real. And as long as there is darkness, there will always be a need to guard against it, ensuring that the spirit of Christmas remains a beacon of hope and light. So, as you gather with loved ones and celebrate the season, remember the old legends and the lessons they carry. Light a candle, embrace the warmth of your home, and keep the darkness at bay. For in the heart of every Christmas, there lies both light and shadow, and it is our duty to protect the former from the encroaching darkness. Story number 2. Christmas in Los Angeles in the 1930s was a peculiar affair. The palm trees, usually swaying gently under the warm December sun, stood tall against the cool twilight, their silhouettes casting long shadows on the bustling streets below. The city, known for its glitz and glamour, had a hidden darkness that only a few dared to acknowledge. I never believed in ghosts or urban legends, but that changed one cold Christmas Eve when the story of the Santa Claus murder and body snatching became my terrifying reality. I was a young journalist working for the Los Angeles Herald, always chasing the next big story. The Great Depression had hit the city hard, and people sought solace in whatever small joys they could find. Christmas was no exception. Streets were adorned with twinkling lights, storefronts decorated with festive wreaths, and every corner seemed to whisper promises of hope and renewal. But beneath the surface, something sinister was brewing. It was December 24th, 1930, a night when the city was alive with anticipation. Families gathered for parties. Children hung stockings by the fireplace, and the scent of roasted chestnuts filled the air. I had been assigned to cover a lavish Christmas party at the Ambassador Hotel, a hotspot for the city's elite. As I prepared my notes, little did I know that this night would etch itself into my memory forever. The party was in full swing by the time I arrived. The grand ballroom was illuminated by sparkling chandeliers, and guests mingled, their laughter echoing against the ornate walls. In the center of the room stood a towering Christmas tree, adorned with shimmering ornaments and a brilliant star at its peak. The atmosphere was electric, a stark contrast to the hardships outside. Amidst the revelry, my attention was drawn to a man who seemed out of place. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored Santa Claus suit, complete with a plush red coat, white beard, and a jolly demeanor that felt almost too perfect. He moved gracefully through the crowd, greeting guests with a warm smile and hearty chuckles. There was something unnerving about him, a coldness hidden behind the facade of merriment. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to follow him. He led me to a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from the cheerful chaos. "Enjoying the party?" he asked, his voice smooth yet lacking genuine warmth. "Yes, it's wonderful," I replied, trying to mask my unease. "But I couldn't help but notice your outfit. It's quite unique for an adult." He chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Ah, Santa's spirit is timeless, isn't it? Bringing joy to all ages." Before I could respond, the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the room. A sudden chill filled the air, and the festive decorations seemed to warp into grotesque shapes. Guests began to murmur, sensing something was amiss. The man in the Santa suit smiled, but his eyes were cold, devoid of any warmth. "I must excuse myself," he said abruptly, turning to leave, but instead of heading towards the exit, he disappeared into a darkened hallway. Intrigued and increasingly unsettled, I followed him. The hallway was dimly lit, the grandeur of the ballroom replaced by narrow corridors lined with heavy velvet curtains. My footsteps echoed loudly as I navigated the maze-like passageways, the festive cheer now a distant memory. I turned a corner and saw him standing before a large, ornate door. He paused, looking back at me with those unervingly cold eyes. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing," he whispered, his voice now carrying a sinister undertone. Before I could react, the door swung open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with shadows. The man stepped inside, and I hesitated, unsure whether to follow or retreat. My journalistic instincts screamed to uncover the truth, but a primal fear rooted me to the spot. Inside, the room was cluttered with strange artifacts and old photographs. A large fireplace dominated one wall, its mantle adorned with broken ornaments and faded ribbons. In the center stood a grotesque display, several bodies, lifeless and dismembered, arranged in a macabre tableau. My heart pounded as I realized the horrifying reality. This man was no jolly Santa Claus, but a murderer who used the guise of holiday cheer to mask his atrocities. He turned to face me fully, the mask of Santa slipping to reveal a gaunt, pale face with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. "Welcome to my workshop," he said darkly. "Every Christmas, I create my own kind of magic." Panic surged through me as I backed away, but the door slammed shut behind me, trapping me inside. The man advanced, each step deliberate and menacing. "You wanted a story, didn't you?" he hissed. "I offer truth in its rawest form." I stumbled towards the fireplace, hoping to find a way out, But the room seemed to shift around me, the walls closing in. Desperation clawed at my mind as I searched for an escape. The man reached out, his cold fingers inches from my face. "Your time is limited," he whispered. "Soon, your story will be mine." Just as he was about to touch me, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. The sound of approaching footsteps reverberated through the house. My adrenaline surged, and I seized the moment to dash towards the door. The man lunged after me, but the door burst open, and a group of police officers flooded the room, guns drawn. "Freeze! Put your hands up!" one of them commanded. The man in the Santa suit hesitated, his eyes darting between me and the approaching officers. With a snarl, he vanished into thin air, leaving behind an air of malevolence that seemed to cling to the very walls. The officers quickly secured the room, but the damage was done. The bodies remained, a chilling reminder of the horror that had unfolded. I was left shaken, my mind struggling to comprehend the night's events. The police labeled it a gruesome act of madness, but I knew there was something more, a darkness that thrived in the shadows of the holiday season. In the aftermath, the story made headlines, the Santa Claus murder and body snatching becoming a terrifying legend in Los Angeles. People spoke in hushed tones, avoiding the festive decorations that once symbolized joy. I tried to move on, burying the memory in countless articles and reports, but the nightmare lingered. Years later, I still dream of that Christmas Eve, the image of the man in the Santa suit etched into my mind. The festive lights now seem to flicker with a hidden menace, and the joyous carols carry an undertone of dread. I changed careers, hoping to distance myself from the darkness, but the story never truly left me. Occasionally, on cold December nights, I feel a presence watching me, a silent reminder of that night. The memory of the Santa Claus killer serves as a constant warning. Beneath the veneer of holiday cheer, there can lurk unimaginable evil, and as each Christmas approaches, I can't help but wonder if the darkness will return, seeking new victims to add to its gruesome collection. Christmas is supposed to be a time of joy and togetherness, but sometimes it's the very things we hold dear that hide the deepest horrors. The story of the Santa Claus murder and body snatching remains a chilling testament to that truth, a reminder that even in the brightest of seasons, darkness can find its way in. So, as the next Christmas approaches, and you see the twinkling lights and hear the cheerful songs, remember that not all that glitters is gold. Sometimes, the most terrifying monsters wear the most unexpected masks, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal their true nature. And in those quiet, festive nights, you might just catch a glimpse of the darkness that once haunted Los Angeles, forever entwined with the spirit of Christmas. Story number 3. Santa Claus Killer. I never thought Christmas could be anything but joyful. The twinkling lights, the soft carols, the scent of pine needles filling the living room. It all used to wrap me in a warm blanket of nostalgia. That was before the Christmas of 1975, the year everything changed. I was 8 years old, living in a quiet suburb of Houston, Texas. Our neighborhood was the kind where everyone knew each other, where doors were left unlocked, and children played freely in the streets until dusk. My best friend, Tommy Jenkins, lived just 2 houses down. We did everything together, rode bikes, built forts, shared secrets. As December rolled in, the anticipation of the holidays filled the air. Tommy and I spent our afternoons crafting wish lists and debating the merits of various toys. On Christmas Eve, a light snowfall dusted the lawns, a rare treat for Texas. My parents tucked me in early, promising that Santa would skip our house if I wasn't asleep. Sometime deep in the night, I awoke to a muffled thud. Groggy, I sat up in bed, the soft glow of the moon casting shadows on my walls. I heard it again, a sound like something heavy being dragged. Curiosity piqued. I slipped out of bed and crept to my window. Across the street, I saw a figure in a red suit and a floppy hat trimmed with white fur. Santa? My heart leaped with excitement, but something was off. He was moving strangely, almost stumbling, dragging a large sack behind him. The sack seemed to squirm, as if something inside was alive. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was dreaming, but when I looked again, Santa was staring straight at me. Even from a distance, I could see his eyes cold, dark pits that made my skin crawl. He raised a gloved finger to his lips, signaling me to be silent. Fear rooted me to the spot. He turned away and headed toward the Jenkins house. I watched as he slipped around the back, disappearing into the shadows. Moments later, a faint scream pierced the night, quickly stifled. Panic surged through me. I wanted to wake my parents, to call the police, but I couldn't move. Minutes felt like hours. The figure reappeared, his sack now bulging and stained with a dark liquid that glistened under the streetlights. He glanced back at my window, and I dove beneath the sill, my heart hammering in my chest. The next morning, Christmas Day, the neighborhood was abuzz with activity. Children laughed as they showed off new toys. Parents chatted cheerfully, but the Jenkins house was eerily quiet. A police car arrived around noon, its silent presence sending a ripple of unease through the community. I learned later that Tommy, his little sister, and his mother were found dead. The official story was a tragic accident, carbon monoxide poisoning, they said. But I knew better. I saw the man in the red suit. I saw Santa. I tried to tell my parents, the police, anyone who would listen, but they dismissed my story as the imagination of a traumatized child. "You've been watching too many scary movies," they'd say, ruffling my hair. Days turned into weeks, and the neighborhood tried to return to normal, but the shadows lingered. I stopped sleeping, haunted by nightmares of those dark eyes and the sinister smile beneath the beard. One night, as I lay awake, I heard a scratching at my window. Fear paralyzed me, but curiosity forced me to look. There he was, Santa, perched on the tree branch outside my room, his face pressed against the glass, his eyes locked onto mine, and a wicked grin spread across his face. "I know you saw me," he whispered, his voice muffled but clear. "You've been a naughty boy," I screamed, scrambling backward. My door burst open as my parents rushed in. "What's wrong?" they demanded. But when I pointed to the window, Santa was gone. They searched the yard but found nothing. The police were called again, and this time they took my story more seriously. Patrols increased, and for a while, the presence of law enforcement provided some comfort. But deep down, I knew he was still out there, watching, waiting. As years passed, the memory of that night faded for everyone but me. I grew up, moved away, tried to build a life beyond the shadows of my childhood. But every Christmas Eve, I can't help but feel that familiar dread. Last year, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a photograph of me as a child, taken from outside my bedroom window. On the back, written in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Still watching." I don't know who he is or why he chose us. The man in the Santa suit became an urban legend, a ghost story parents tell to keep their kids in line. But I know he's real. He's out there, and he's not finished. Tonight is Christmas Eve. I sit here in my dimly lit living room, the curtains drawn tight, every door and window locked. The clock ticks closer to midnight, and I can't shake the feeling that this time, he's coming back for me. A soft thud echoes from the roof, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. I grip the phone tightly, my finger hovering over the call button. Then, a hoarse voice drifts down the chimney. "Ho, ho, ho." I stare at the fireplace, dread curling around me like a suffocating blanket. The grate rattles, and ash spills onto the hearth. A gloved hand emerges, gripping the edge. This time, I won't be the frightened child hiding under the covers. I dial 911, my voice steady as I report the intruder. But as I speak, the lights flicker and die, plunging the room into darkness. The only illumination comes from the faint glow of the dying embers in the fireplace. The silhouette of a man pulls himself into the room, his red suit tattered and stained. "Been a long time," he whispers. I back away slowly, searching for any means of escape. The sound of sirens wails faintly in the distance, but I know they won't arrive in time. He takes a step toward me, and I can see his face clearly now. Pale skin stretched over sharp cheekbones, a twisted smile revealing yellowed teeth. "Why?" I manage to ask, my voice barely audible. He chuckles softly. "Because some gifts are meant to be shared." He lunges, and I stumble backward, tripping over the coffee table. As I hit the ground, my hand closes around the heavy metal of the fireplace poker. Without thinking, I swing upward as he descends upon me. The poker connects with a sickening thud. He staggers, a look of surprise flashing across his face. The sirens grow louder, lights flashing through the front windows. He retreats, scrambling back up the chimney with unnatural agility. The last thing I hear is his parting whisper echoing down the flue. "Until next year." The police find me shaken but unharmed. They search the house, the roof, the yard, but there's no sign of him. They advise me to stay with friends or family for a while, and I agree, but I know this isn't over. He'll be back, whether next Christmas or the one after that. And when he does, I'll be ready. Some say Santa only visits those who believe in him. I wish I didn't. Story number 4. The night was colder than usual for Oregon in December 1999. Snowflakes danced erratically in the frigid air, swirling around streetlights and blanketing the quiet suburban streets in a pristine layer of white. Christmas Eve had always been a magical time in our small town of Evergreen Heights, but that year, something felt decidedly off. I'm Jake Thompson, a local journalist for the Evergreen Gazette. Over the years, I've covered everything from high school drama to local politics, but nothing prepared me for the story that would change my life forever. It began with a call late one evening, just as I was about to wrap up my shift. "Jake, you need to get down to Pine Ridge Road." My editor, Linda, urged over the phone. "There's been an accident. It's unusual." Curiosity piqued. I grabbed my coat and headed out into the biting cold. Pine Ridge Road was one of the quieter streets in town, lined with modest homes that glowed warmly from within, decorated with twinkling lights and festive ornaments. As I approached the scene, the flashing lights of police cars and an ambulance illuminated the area, casting long shadows on the freshly fallen snow. A small crowd had already gathered, their breaths visible in the frigid air as they whispered among themselves. I pushed through, making my way to the front where a uniformed officer stood, speaking in hushed tones to a curious onlooker. "What happened here?" I asked, flashing my press badge. The officer glanced at me, then back to the scene. "It's strange. A man dressed as Santa Claus was involved in a car accident. His car is totaled, but there are no signs of foul play or intoxication. What's even weirder is that there's no ID on him. Police can't figure out who he is." My heart raced. A Santa Claus car crash with no identity? This was the kind of bizarre story that could put Evergreen Heights on the map. For better or worse, I needed to see it for myself. As I approached the wreckage, the sight that greeted me was both eerie and heartbreaking. The car, a beat-up old station wagon, was crumpled against a tree, smoke still rising from the engine. Inside, slumped over the steering wheel, was the man in the Santa suit. His red coat was torn, the white fur frayed and dirty. His face was obscured by the hood of the suit, but I could make out the glint of his eyes staring blankly at the night sky. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. Something about this scene felt wrong, like the calm before a storm. I scanned the area, looking for any clues that might explain the mysterious man's presence. Nothing. No purse, no wallet, no personal items, just the suit and the lifeless body inside the car. "Has anyone seen him before?" I asked the officer. "No," he replied. "No one reported seeing a Santa Claus wandering around tonight. It's as if he just appeared out of nowhere, determined to get to the bottom of this." I decided to investigate further. Over the next few days, I delved into the man's background, but every lead turned up nothing. No records, no fingerprints, nothing. It was as if he had vanished from existence the moment he donned the Santa suit. One evening, as I sat in my cluttered office surrounded by stacks of newspapers and notes, a knock echoed through the room. I opened the door to find Mrs. Henderson, an elderly neighbor known for her sweet demeanor and love of holiday stories. "Jake, I heard about what happened on Pine Ridge," she began, her voice wavering. I think I saw something that night." I invited her in, sensing that her account might shed some light on the mystery. She sat down, clutching a knitted shawl around her shoulders. "I was walking my dog around midnight," she recalled. "I saw a man dressed as Santa, but he looked different. His eyes, Jake, they were not kind. They were cold, almost lifeless. He was standing by the old Willow Creek Bridge, staring into the water. I thought he was lost or something, so I offered to help him." I leaned forward, intrigued. "What happened next?" Mrs. Henderson took a deep breath, her eyes distant. "He didn't take me up on my offer. Instead, he just stood there, staring. Then, without warning, he disappeared into the fog that rolled in from the creek. It was like he was never there." A chill ran down my spine. The Willow Creek Bridge had been abandoned for years, the subject of local ghost stories and urban legends. Some said it was haunted by restless spirits. Others believed it was cursed, but never had anyone mentioned a Santa Claus apparition. That night, unable to sleep, I decided to visit the bridge. Armed with a flashlight and my notepad, I trudged through the snow, the cold biting at my skin. The bridge loomed ahead, its old wooden planks creaking under my weight. The moon was high, casting an ethereal glow over the water below. I stood in the center of the bridge, the silence oppressive. Then, out of the darkness, a figure emerged. It was him, the man in the Santa suit, but something was undeniably wrong. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and his movements were jerky, almost robotic. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't respond, just stared at me with those piercing eyes. Suddenly, the air grew thick, and a sense of dread washed over me. I tried to back away, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. In that moment, memories flooded my mind, memories that weren't mine. I saw flashes of a life I never lived, a jolly man who loved Christmas, a family that adored him, and a tragic accident that ended it all. It was as if I was experiencing his final moments. The vision faded, and he stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You need to help me," he whispered, his voice echoing through the night. "Find peace." I shook my head, trying to dispel the visions. "I don't know how." He extended a hand, palm open. "Look inside. Remember." Before I could react, everything went black. When I awoke, I was back in my office, the morning sun streaming through the windows. My head throbbed, and my notes from the night before were scattered across the desk. Had it all been a dream, or something more? Determined to uncover the truth, I revisited the Willow Creek Bridge. This time, I brought along some equipment, a camera, voice recorder, and even a small mirror. As I stood in the center, the air grew thick once more, and the man in the Santa suit appeared. "Help me," he repeated, more urgent this time. I held up the mirror, catching his reflection. His eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw his true self, a sorrowful soul trapped between worlds. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. He gestured towards the water, his expression pleading. "The bridge. It's his final resting place. His spirit is restless, unable to move on. You need to give him peace." I nodded, understanding dawning on me. "How?" He pointed to a small plaque beneath the bridge, partially obscured by snow. I approached, reading the faded letters. "In loving memory of Thomas Caldwell, beloved father and husband taken too soon on Christmas Eve, 1999. Tears welled up in my eyes. Thomas Caldwell. The name matched the vague memories from my visions. He had died in a car accident on Christmas Eve, just like the man in the Santa suit. But how? Realizing what needed to be done, I began to clean the plaque, removing the snow and debris. As I did, the temperature seemed to rise, the oppressive feeling lifting slightly. I placed a wreath of pine branches around the plaque, a symbol of peace and remembrance. "Thank you," the voice whispered, softer now. The man in the Santa suit smiled, a genuine warmth replacing the coldness in his eyes. Slowly, he began to fade, his form dissolving into the morning light. I stood there, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. Thomas Caldwell's spirit had been freed, his story finally told. As I left the bridge, the sun breaking through the clouds, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. In the days that followed, the story of the mysterious Santa Claus accident gained traction. I published my account, detailing the haunting encounter and the truth behind Thomas Caldwell's death. The town of Evergreen Heights found solace in the revelation. The dark mystery finally resolved. But some nights, especially around Christmas, I still feel a presence watching over me, a reminder that even in the most joyous times, there can be shadows lurking just beneath the surface. The story of the strange Santa Claus accident became a local legend, a tale of sorrow and redemption that reminded us all of the fragile line between life and death, and the enduring spirit of Christmas. As the years passed, I often found myself walking past the Willow Creek Bridge, a silent vigil to honor Thomas Caldwell. The snow continued to fall each winter, but now it felt like a blessing rather than a curse. The lights of Evergreen Heights shone brightly, a beacon of hope and remembrance. And every Christmas Eve, as I sit by the fire with my family, I think of Thomas and the mysterious Santa who sought my help. It's a story I share with them, a testament to the power of compassion and the belief that even in death, we can find peace. So, if you ever find yourself in Evergreen Heights on a snowy Christmas night, take a moment to remember those who came before us. Light a candle, cherish your loved ones, and keep the spirit of Christmas alive. For in the heart of every holiday lies both light and shadow, and it's our duty to honor and protect the memories that bind us together. Story number 5. I used to believe that Christmas was a time for miracles and joy, a season where the darkest nights were illuminated by the warm glow of family and love. Growing up in a small town in California, Christmas was the highlight of the year. The streets were adorned with twinkling lights. The scent of pine and cinnamon filled the air, and every window showcased festive decorations. But that all changed on Christmas Eve of 1996, the night that would haunt me forever. I was 22, living with my wife, Laura, and our 2 young children, Emily and Jack, in a cozy suburban home. Life was good until the night that shattered our peace. Laura and I had been together since high school, and our love had only grown stronger over the years. We had built a life filled with laughter, dreams, and the promise of a bright future. Little did I know, darkness was lurking just beneath the surface. That December evening started like any other. Laura was in the kitchen preparing dinner, the aroma of her famous roast filling our home. The kids were excitedly discussing their Christmas lists, eyes wide with anticipation. I was settling down to watch a holiday movie, content in the comfort of my family's presence. The night was quiet, the only sounds the crackling of the fireplace and the occasional cheer from the TV. As midnight approached, Laura suggested we all go to bed early to be well-rested for Christmas Day. I agreed, helping the kids brush their teeth and tuck them into bed. After kissing them goodnight, Laura and I settled into our own room, the soft glow of the bedside lamp casting a warm light. We talked about our plans for the next day, the excitement of opening presents, and the simple joy of spending the holiday together. Around 1 a.m., I was jolted awake by the sound of shattering glass. My heart pounded as I turned on the bedside lamp, the sudden brightness revealing Laura standing by the window, her eyes wide with fear. "What's wrong?" I whispered, reaching out to her. Before she could respond, a hulking figure in a Santa Claus suit burst through the window, the glass cascading around him like glittering rain. My blood ran cold as I took in his twisted features, dark eyes devoid of any warmth, a sinister smile beneath the white beard. The jolly facade was gone, replaced by something malevolent and terrifying. "Stay back," I managed to say, pulling Laura and the kids behind me. The man advanced, his movements jerky and unnatural. "I just want to talk," he rasped, his voice gravelly and cold. Laura grabbed Emily and Jack, shielding them as I faced the intruder. My mind raced, searching for a way to protect my family. The man in the Santa suit didn't seem interested in gifts or cheer. His intentions were dark and twisted. He reached into his sack, pulling out something that glinted ominously in the dim light. "Leave now," I demanded, my voice steadier than I felt. "You're not welcome here," he chuckled, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, but I am. I've been waiting for this night for a long time." Panic surged through me as I realized the gravity of the situation. This wasn't a random intruder, it was someone with a purpose. Someone who had chosen our home deliberately. I glanced at Laura, her face pale but resolute. We had to protect our children. The man lunged, and chaos erupted. I grabbed the heavy fireplace poker from beside the hearth, swinging it with all my might. The first blow connected with his arm, eliciting a pained grunt. He staggered but quickly recovered, his red suit now smeared with blood. Laura screamed, pulling Emily and Jack to the other side of the room, their tiny faces etched with fear. "Run!" I shouted, pushing Laura towards the back door. But the man was relentless, moving with a strength that seemed almost inhuman. He swung again, this time catching me off guard and sending me crashing to the floor. Pain shot through my body, but I refused to give up. I scrambled to my feet, determined to protect my family at any cost. Emily and Jack were sobbing, clutching each other tightly. Laura's eyes met mine, a silent plea for help that fueled my desperation. I swung the poker again, this time connecting with his head. He stumbled back, dazed but not defeated. Blood trickled from the wound, but his eyes still burned with a dark intensity. In a last desperate effort, I grabbed Laura's hand and pulled her towards the kitchen. "We need to get out," I said, my voice strained with pain. "Now!" We stumbled into the kitchen, the intruder following closely behind. I fumbled with the drawer, pulling out the kitchen knife with shaking hands. Laura grabbed Emily and Jack, huddling them behind the counter. "Stay quiet," she whispered, her voice trembling. The man in the Santa suit advanced, his presence overwhelming. "You can't hide from me," he snarled, reaching for us. I held the knife tightly, every instinct screaming to fight. But before he could reach us, the sound of sirens pierced the night air. Relief washed over me as flashing lights illuminated the windows. The intruder paused, glancing towards the sound of approaching police cars. "This isn't over," he growled, his eyes burning with fury. With a final, desperate glance, he turned and fled, disappearing into the darkness. The police arrived moments later, their lights casting eerie shadows across our home. Officers swarmed the area, searching for the elusive killer. I watched, breathless, as they combed through our property, finding nothing but the shattered remains of the window and the bloodstains that marked the night. Bruce Jeffrey was his name, they said, a man with a history of mental instability and violent tendencies. He had donned the Santa Claus suit not to spread joy, but to mask his true, sinister nature. The news reported the incident as a horrifying case of domestic violence gone wrong. But I knew there was more to the story. Bruce had chosen our home for a reason, and the scars he left behind were deeper than any official report could capture. In the weeks that followed, our lives were forever changed. Laura struggled with nightmares, the memory of that night a constant shadow. Emily and Jack were terrified of the dark, their innocence shattered by the terror they had witnessed. And I couldn't shake the feeling that Bruce Jeffrey was still out there, watching, waiting for another chance to strike. Christmas became a season of fear rather than joy. Every twinkling light seemed to mock the darkness that had invaded our lives. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, paranoid that the man in the Santa suit would return. The police assured us that Bruce was incarcerated, but the knowledge did little to ease my anxiety. Years passed, but the fear never fully dissipated. Laura and I worked hard to rebuild our lives, but the ghosts of that Christmas Eve lingered. We moved to a new house, hoping to leave the past behind, but every holiday season brought back the haunting memories. The children grew older, their fears slowly subsiding, but the scars remained. Last Christmas, as I decorated the tree with my now teenage children, a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if Bruce Jeffrey wasn't just another disturbed individual? What if the darkness that he embodied was something more, something that could never be truly contained? That night, as we gathered around the tree, the familiar sounds of carols and laughter filled the air. But beneath the surface, a sinister presence lurked, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. I couldn't shake the feeling that Bruce was still out there, his malevolent spirit entwined with the very essence of Christmas. As midnight approached, I stood by the window, eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of the man who had forever altered our lives. The snow began to fall gently, a stark contrast to the violence of that fateful night. And in that silent moment, I made a vow to protect my family, to never let fear overshadow the true meaning of the season. But deep down, I knew that some darkness never truly fades. It waits, patiently, for the next Christmas Eve, ready to bring terror to those who least expect it. And as the clock struck 12, I couldn't help but wonder if Bruce Jeffrey, the Santa Claus killer, was still watching, his eyes burning with a relentless hunger for vengeance. This Christmas, as I embraced my family under the twinkling lights, I held on to hope. Hope that the light of love and togetherness could fend off the darkness that had once invaded our lives. But I also remained vigilant, knowing that evil can sometimes wear the most unexpected masks. And in the shadows, I feared that the nightmare was far from over. Story number 6. The Santa Claus murder and body snatching. The streets of Chicago in the 1960s were a blend of bustling activity and quiet neighborhoods, where the snow-covered sidewalks sparkled under the glow of street lamps. Christmas was approaching, and the city was alive with anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of pine and the distant sound of carols drifting from every corner. I never thought the holiday season could hide such darkness. But that changed one fateful Christmas Eve when the Santa Claus conspiracy unraveled before my very eyes. I was a young journalist for the Chicago Tribune, always on the lookout for a story that would make my career. The city was ripe with tales, from political scandals to mysterious disappearances. But nothing had prepared me for what I was about to uncover. My name is Michael Harris, and this is the story of how I stumbled upon a sinister plot that used the guise of Santa Claus to mask a series of audacious robberies. It all began in early December when a series of high-profile burglaries shook the affluent neighborhoods of Chicago. Wealthy families reported their homes being ransacked during the night, valuables stolen without a trace. The police were baffled. There were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing. The only common thread was that each robbery occurred on Christmas Eve, and in each case, the thieves donned Santa Claus outfits. One chilly evening, as I sipped my coffee in the dimly lit newsroom, my editor approached me with a tip that piqued my interest. "Michael, there's something fishy going on with these Christmas Eve burglaries. People are saying it's organized, maybe even a group. Think you can dig deeper?" I accepted the challenge, sensing a story that could be both compelling and chilling. My first stop was the scene of the latest burglary in the upscale neighborhood of Lincoln Park. The homeowner, Mrs. Evelyn Whitaker, was a prominent socialite known for her lavish Christmas parties. She greeted me with a mix of fear and frustration. "They came in dressed as Santa Claus," she recounted, her hands trembling. "One moment, everything was peaceful, and the next, they were there, My husband and I were opening presents with the kids, and suddenly, these men burst in, knocking us unconscious. When we woke up, everything valuable was gone. As I listened, a pattern began to emerge. Each family described a similar scenario: the presence of Santa, the abrupt intrusion, and the inexplicable theft. Determined to get to the bottom of this mystery, I decided to go undercover. I needed to see these Santases in action to understand their modus operandi. On Christmas Eve, I dressed in a Santa suit, blending in with the throngs of costumed revelers heading to parties and gatherings. The night was crisp, the city adorned with twinkling lights and festive decorations. I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension as I navigated the crowded streets, my eyes scanning for any suspicious activity. Hours passed without incident until midnight approached. I was heading towards a grand estate in the affluent suburb of Gold Coast when I noticed a group of Santas congregating near the entrance. They were an odd sight, too coordinated. Their movements synchronized as if they were part of a well-rehearsed play. Their smiles were fixed, eyes scanning the surroundings with an unnerving precision. One of them, a tall man with a scar running down his left cheek, caught my attention. His presence exuded authority, and there was something cold beneath his jolly facade. I followed the group as they moved stealthily towards the estate, slipping inside through an unlocked window with practiced ease. Inside, the grandeur of the Whitaker residence was dimmed by the flickering lights of the Christmas tree. The family was gathered in the living room, exchanging gifts and sharing laughter. The Santas blended seamlessly into the scene, their roles indistinguishable from genuine holiday cheer. I kept my distance, observing their actions. As the clock struck midnight, the Santas sprang into action. The room erupted into chaos as the imposters moved swiftly, subduing the family members with unexpected brutality. It was over in minutes. The room was ransacked, valuables seized, and the family left in a state of shock and confusion. I knew I had to act quickly. Discreetly, I took photos of the scene, capturing the masked figures and their methodical approach. As I retreated, the realization hit me. This was no random act of theft. It was a calculated conspiracy, using the beloved image of Santa Claus to exploit the trust and vulnerability of wealthy families during the holiday season. Back at the newsroom, I pored over the photos and cross-referenced them with previous incidents. The similarities were striking. The Santas were not just robbers. They were part of an organized group with a clear agenda. The scarred man seemed to be the leader, orchestrating the heists with military precision. Determined to expose the truth, I delved deeper into the city's underbelly, uncovering connections to organized crime rings and local gangs. The Santas were a cover, a way to distract and manipulate during a time when people were least expecting it. Their reputation as symbols of generosity and joy made them the perfect disguise for their nefarious activities. As Christmas approached again the following year, I felt a sense of urgency. The group would likely strike again, and I had to be prepared. I collaborated with the police, sharing my findings and strategizing to intercept the Santas before they could execute another heist. The night of December 24th was a tense one, filled with anticipation and fear. I positioned myself near another affluent neighborhood, blending in with the holiday crowd. The air was thick with excitement, children's laughter echoing through the streets. Hours passed without incident, but the dread lingered. Just as I was about to lose hope, a group of Santas emerged from the shadows, moving with the same calculated intent as before. This time, I was ready, equipped with my camera and a hidden microphone. I followed them silently. They made their way into a grand manor. Much like the Whitaker estate, I signaled the police, who moved in swiftly, surrounding the property. The confrontation was brief but intense. The Santas attempted to flee, but the authorities were prepared. Several were apprehended, including the scarred leader who now stood defeated, his mask removed to reveal a cold, merciless gaze. The aftermath was a media frenzy. The Santa Claus conspiracy was exposed, shocking the community and tarnishing the beloved image of Santa. Families were left questioning their holiday traditions, while the city grappled with the betrayal of trust. The convicted criminals revealed a deeper network, a web of deceit that spanned beyond Chicago, exploiting the magic of Christmas for their gain. For me, the story was both a triumph and a haunting reminder of how darkness can lurk beneath even the most cherished symbols. The joy of the holiday season had been tainted by greed and manipulation, a legacy that lingered long after the criminals were behind bars. Years have passed since that Christmas Eve, but the memory remains vivid. Every holiday season, as I watch children marvel at Santa's arrival, I can't help but feel a pang of unease. The image of those twisted Santas serves as a cautionary tale that even in times of joy and giving, shadows can find their way in, exploiting our deepest hopes and dreams. The Santa Claus conspiracy taught me that stories have power, and sometimes, the most beloved tales can hide the darkest truths. As I sit by the fireplace each Christmas, I reflect on that chilling experience, grateful for the peace that now prevails. But a part of me remains vigilant, knowing that the spirit of Christmas can attract both the good and the malevolent. So this holiday season, as you celebrate with loved ones and embrace the magic of Santa Claus, remember the story of the Santas who used joy as a mask for their crimes. Let it serve as a reminder to cherish the true meaning of the season and to remain watchful. For darkness can sometimes wear the most unexpected disguises.